In February this year, I went to the Warhammer shop in Nottingham with a friend to get into the financially questionable game that is Warhammer. We painted a Stormcast each, and after playing a short game between two generals, where I almost instantly killed his general with my rattling pistol, only to finish him off with my warpstone halberd, I was completely sold. My friend, not so much. I caved in and bought the £40 Skaven tied box, and oh boy am I glad I did. I'm not a sporty or party person, so Warhammer gives me something a bit more hands-on to do, and games give a nice social setting away from the UK roadmen epidemic by getting to know your local game store community. I'm not saying I've spoken to everyone at my game store, but the day I went in to play AOS, I was having some pretty good conversations with the people playing card games across from me. Personally, I'd never get into card games as it seems like glorified gambling, paired with the fact that a cheapskate like me can barely justify spending this much on plastic soldiers, yet alone some pretty cards. That's not a dig at card games, please don't hurt me. We all have nerdy overpriced things we like. Okay, getting back on track, I built and painted them to a decent standard for some of my first models. Over time, my collection grew until I eventually amounted all this. So you have a decent collection of a certain army at least put together. What's next? Well, it's time to play your first game. To do this, I had to go into the shop itself, talk to some people, and receive the Facebook of the owner to set something up. 2 months later, because finding a game of AOS is the equivalent of trying to find water in a desert, my first game was arranged. It was a 1000 point battle between my Skaven and Chris's Stormcast Eternals. My army consisted of Kritok Foulblade leading 20 clan rats, a rattling warp blaster, 10 storm vermin, and a master molder leading 20 clan rats with a hellpit named Cupcake. Chris's army consisted of Yndrastra leading 3 Annihilators, 3 Prosecutors, 3 Crossbows, and 10 Vindicators. The more mathematically minded of you may have noticed a model difference of 20 to 54, but trust me when I say there is no strength in numbers when it comes to Skaven. Only mediocrity. I just want to put a bit of a warning that this was about 2 months ago, so I can only roughly recall what happened. Meaning, paired with my lack of knowledge for the game, details will certainly be a bit iffy. Exclaimer aside, let's get into the battle. Here is my quote, expert recreation of the board layout. Blue is for objectives and red is places of power, which is irrelevant since we both didn't use magic as that's a whole thing in its own right. Deployment ended up looking like this, both of us playing quite aggressively. I had 20 clan rats in tunnels below and Chris had his annihilators in the heavens above. Some things to note is that my hell pit is an infantry destroyer and the rest of my non-clan rat units are mid at best, just following the rule of cool. For Chris, I don't know what's good in terms of Stormcast, except for the Annihilators and Yndrastra. Every molecule of her being has been genetically coded to kill my hellpit. With the big threats explained, we rolled for first turn, which I lost. However, this can be an advantage for Skaven due to the always 3 claw steps ahead. This allows me to make a movement during my enemy's hero phase, aka their first phase. Paired with Kritok's reputation for cunning, allowed me to move both him and the Storm Vermin to just barely touch the objective. Storm Vermin have anti-charge, which means forcing Chris to charge me could have been a good move. Key word, coulda. Since despite being my favourite unit, Storm Vermin are complete ass cheeks. Clan rats simply do their job better. The Storm Vermin were soon on the receiving end of a complete molestation. So combat works in a give and take way. For example, his prosecutors were gracious enough to leave me with a whopping 3 Storm Vermin. Learning that Kritok has strike first, which could have possibly negated some of that damage to the Storm Vermin, Kritok then attacked, completely wiping out his prosecutors, because he is deceptively strong for a Skaven. Then my Storm Vermin were finished off by Yndrastra, meaning my favourite model did a glonk, does absolutely nothing, and dies. Thank God for the rule of cool. I Really feel like a winner now. So that's all for combat resolved, which meant it was now my turn. Nothing eventful happened in the hero phase, and my movement was something along these lines. As you may have spotted, I deployed my clan rats out of my gnaw hole to apply pressure on his now vulnerable crossbowman / home objective, forcing him to go defend if he wants to keep his home territory. So the question on everyone's mind, did I charge Yndrashta back to honour the loss of my storm vermin? Like hell I did. I ran off, dealt some decent chip damage with Krittok's pistol, and then charged her because I realised if she gets behind my warp blaster, it would be Jova. Before we get onto the melee, I did also shoot my rattling warp blaster into the Vindicators. Combined with overwhelming fire and more warpstone, which I've just realised meant I cheated since I didn't even have a Scryer character in my list to let me do that, I managed to kill a whopping 2 Vindicators, as well as dealing 3 damage to myself. Even with cheats, this thing still doesn't live up to the model. Unlike the Warp Blaster, Krittok didn't disappoint, and had significantly wounded Yndrashta before laying down his life. Never did I ever think that something semi-heroic would be coming from the Skaven side. So back to Chris, and my million IQ clan rats play successfully baited Yndrashta away from my key units. Also, you may have noticed that I've not mentioned what the crossbows have done yet, and that's because they haven't done anything. Chris was used to their 24-inch range instead of a now 18-inch range. I did offer Chris the choice to move from last turn, but he refused, most likely to give me, for newbie, an easier time. Finishing off this movement, I have to admit that I didn't remember anything regarding the Annihilators until this point. Remedying this, I'm just going to plot them down here and go with the flow, you know. So the Vindicator Annihilator blob charged the clan rats. Oh, that hurts. At least, I managed to do a whopping 1 wound in retaliation. Now, it's my turn. As I moved my Hellpit closer to his infantry blob, my mouth began to salivate. Same case for my sneaky ambush with my storm vermin, who I managed to revive using a command point on the gnaw hole. My shooting was self-destructive at best, managing to kill another Vindicator as well as itself. Hey, if your mortality rate is lower than your opponent, you're not playing Skaven correctly. Am I right, lads? Oh yeah. You're dead. I failed the charge on both my clan rats and Hellpit. However, I used another command point to re-roll for charge. Imagine this. On a 4 up, my Hellpit is about to kick some ass. Or it will be a sitting duck to get potentially killed by the crossbows. The dice rolls and lands on a 4. In that specific moment, I was so fucking wet. Annihilators have this rule where they get strike first upon being charged, or I get strike last. Something along them lines. Oh, a measly 4 wounds. Cupcake, Sickum. All 3 of Chris's Annihilators were killed that round. A devastating loss. Oh, for 4 wounds? Yeah, the Hellpit just heals it back like a unit. Chris's turn could be summed up to my surprise clan rats getting skewered by spears and crossbow bolts alike, with his Vindicators understandably running off from the Hellpit. His Annihilators sometime around now respawned below my objective. He manages to take it, then my Hellpit kills him again and heals back to near full wounds with the aid of the Master Molder. My Storm Vermin once again does nothing and dies. My Hellpit then chases down the Vindicators who are pinned in combat by my clan rats, murdering them all. Then Yndrashta comes over to shish kebab my Master Molder and then absolutely murders the Hellpit in combat. However, the Hellpit has my favourite rule in the game: too horrible to die. This thing is such an affront to God that it can revive itself on a 5 up. I roll a 6, only to be killed again in an act of what is probably mercy, all things considered. And by this point, we knew I had already lost, so we called it game. If I'm not wrong, it was a 31-38 defeat, which isn't bad for a first game, all things considered. A question I had going into this is how long do games last, and all I can say is varies. I'll tell you that my first game took just under 6 hours. With time, a 1k point game would take 1 to 2 hours, but I want to say that it felt like 2 hours. If you're on the bench about getting into Warhammer, or even just trying out Age of Sigmar instead of 40k, I'd wholeheartedly recommend going for it. I mean, I had so much fun. So, I just wanted to say Chris was a sound guy and an amazing first opponent. I feel like I've gotten a good grasp on the basics and a better understanding of what to do better in the future. I don't really have much else to say since I just wanted to make a shorter video recalling what happened in a hopefully entertaining way before I inevitably forget. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. With all that said, see you whenever, Trevor.